and I'd always been healthy.
I've got 5 pairs of skis sitting in my closet and at home, and hockey gear and windsurfing sails and mountain bikes just sitting there. You know, I don't want to sell them because I'm going to get better. Get better or die trying.
What happened to my dancing? How about what happened to my walking?
Everything's different now. I'm a disabled person. I was a healthy person.
People with syphids aren't the only ones affected. Syphids is hard on the entire family.
Kim's husband is very supportive, but he is carrying around a rage you just cannot believe. And when it surfaces, he just explodes. This is very common with syphids.
So often we see people with this disease, typically women, who are cast aside by their husbands, even by their parents, and they end up totally isolated because nobody believes they're really sick.
As if loss of health, job, family, and friends weren't enough, there is the enormous cost of this disease.
I'm barely skimping by. I lost my house, I lost my job, I lost my self-esteem.
I lost my legal practice. I had to file bankruptcy and lost my automobile and all of my assets during the bankruptcy.
I ended up, when the warm weather, I ended up living in my little car with my dog.
I have lost everything I've worked for my whole life. I have spent the last 6 years being housebound. I no longer grocery shop. I no longer do laundry. I no longer pay bills. I'm not a functioning human being.
I know from personal experience that this is a devastating disease. There is nothing that you cherish that this disease cannot take away from you. Absolutely nothing. Your career, your identity, your reason for living.
How can it be that so many Americans must suffer so greatly? How in this information age is it possible that not only the average American citizen, but the average American doctor knows so little about a disease that some experts call the AIDS of the 90s? Syphids advocates blame the name given the disease by the Centers for Disease Control and the National Institutes for Health.
Sometimes, you know, I want to call it chronic fear syndrome instead of chronic fatigue, because chronic fatigue sounds like, just take me to Oprah and give me the bonbons, and the illness is not like that at all.
The name that this disease has been given in this country is trivializing.
We have a joke amongst the syphids community, both patients and providers, I think, that we need to get the F word out of the chronic fatigue immune dysfunction syndrome. The F word is a little bit like describing diabetes as the chronic peeing disease. Of course, people who have diabetes pee a lot, but the disease covers so much more and includes so many other symptoms that it really does not do the disease justice. The same is true for chronic fatigue syndrome.
And that has greatly hampered our efforts to be taken seriously by anybody, the media, our families, the press, the medical profession.
But the name is only part of the problem. Syphids has a history of halting recognition by the medical establishment. The American Medical Association has made equivocal statements at best. And research at the National Institutes for Health has concentrated on proving syphids to be a psychoneurotic ailment. The leading syphids investigator at NIH, Stephen Strauss, refused to be interviewed. Only recently has the NIH acknowledged the immune abnormalities present in syphids patients. Consequently, few doctors are adequately prepared to recognize or treat syphids patients.
And I was on the guilty side of mistreating a number of patients. I'd see a patient who I thought there was something wrong, and I did a good workup, and it was all benign. And then I was faced with a dilemma. I had to confess to the patient that I had no idea of what was going on, and that's very uncomfortable to do. Moreover, I'm afraid maybe I'll get sued. If I'm missing a cancer, I'm going to get sued.
Syphids patients represent, in a sense, kind of the physician's worst nightmare, because diseases such as multiple sclerosis, lupus, Lyme disease. These diseases are all things that sit in the back of my mind, and I'm always wondering, is this a case of multiple sclerosis that looks like a case of syphilis that I am misdiagnosing?
Faced with the enormous costs of medical care, syphilis patients have turned to their insurance companies for help.
There are numerous problems involving medical insurance for people with syphilis. On the one hand, if a person applies for health insurance at a time that he or she has already been diagnosed with syphilis, the insurance company won't issue the policy. On the other hand, if the person comes down with syphilis after he or she's taken out the policy, but during the waiting period, the insurance company will say, you had a pre-existing condition which we won't insure. Or the insurance company will suggest you don't have a pre-existing condition, but all of the medical treatments that you've suggested you want it paid for are experimental, and we don't cover experimental treatments. In addition, they have trouble getting Social Security disability or SSI disability and Medicaid and Medicare. If they can't get those, or the funding of those is inadequate, or don't pay for the treatments they need, then they can easily become homeless. They can't pay their rent, they're out on the street.
syphilis advocates say they are confronting a frightening reality. Our present-day health systems can't afford another AIDS.
I think there's a huge investment now in this country to not want to know there's another epidemic, because it's very possible that the progress of AIDS alone will sink the public health establishment in the country.
All of the systems in medical care are set up for people either getting well or dying. For example, doctors, they don't want to see chronically ill people. They can't do anything for them. They come back, they get sick again. They come back, they get sick again. They can't cure them.
In the case of a chronic disease, such as CFIDS, we have children who get this disease and people in their 20s. And if it goes on, I've had the disease 13 years.
The message to government regulators and business people is there'll be a lot of downtime of people not being able to report to work, therefore putting companies at risk. It's like the AIDS epidemic and everything else. When you have somebody trained for 20, 30 years to do a job and they can't perform this job, that's bad for the individual and it's bad for the environment they work in. So I think it's going to have a major toll.
The most important thing is to communicate that at NIH there is a commitment to find answers about this illness. And very serious work is going on. It's steadily increased from less than $500,000 in 1986 to more than $3 million in 1992.
I don't think a $3 million contribution from the NIH this year is a sincere commitment to a disease that's affecting 100,000 to 1 million people.
While the government has been slow to respond, syphilis patients have not taken their illness lying down. In the early 1980s, they began to organize.
The Syphilis Foundation started when a group of my friends got together about 6 years ago and put on a little fundraiser in a living room and raised $1,000.
Since 1986, the Chronic Fatigue Immune Dysfunction Syndrome Foundation in San Francisco has been helping people with syphilis. In addition to public education and policy development, the foundation offers telephone counseling and physician referrals to patients and their families. For many people with syphilis, the hotline provides the first understanding and support they have received since becoming ill.
No, you just want to feel better. You just want to feel like you can live, right?
Across the country in Charlotte, North Carolina, a former banker established the National Syphilis Association.
The CFIDS Association was really born out of desperation. Many patients, such as myself,